Water hitting the ground felt like an insult. In August of 1851, under the searing sun of San Luis Obispo County, Luke Carver, a thirsty man, and his horse stood at the gate of Eleanor Hart's vineyard and watched her tip an entire bucket of clean water into the cracked dirt. She would rather spill good water into dust than let him drink it. Standing before him was a widow, not yet 40, 7 years on her own, over 40 acres, which is about 16 hectares, with no trust for any man who crossed her fence. Luke was 26 too young, people would say, too reckless, too bold for a widow who had buried a soldier. But in those cool blue eyes he saw something else, a loneliness that matched his own. That is how their story began. A woman pouring water into the ground to hold a boundary, and a man who would not turn away. If you want to know whether love can survive when a whole town stands against it, stay with me until the end, because before it becomes beautiful, it will become dangerous. Luke's horse trembled, its coat matted with sweat after 2 days on the trail from Bakersfield. "Ma'am," he said, taking off his hat, his voice rough with thirst, "just for the horse, I will pay." Eleanor Hart stood guard in front of the trough, like it was the last fortress. The public spring is 2 miles from here, which is about 3.2 kilometers. Her eyes flicked to the horse, then away. "My horse is about to collapse," he said quietly. She paused, glanced at the scar on his shoulder, then filled another bucket and poured it into the trough. The horse drank greedily. "Thank you," he said. "You do not owe me anything," she answered, her voice hoarse. "It is only water." Luke watched her go, knowing he ought to leave and unable to. 3 days later, Luke Carver stepped into the little general store in Paso Robles to get out of the sun and saw Eleanor Hart. She was buying flour and rope, calm as a winter pond. Their eyes brushed for a moment, then she turned away. "You are the hired hand over at the Morrison place, right?" Clara Tate asked. "Yes, I am between jobs now," Luke said. Clara's smile tilted. "Mrs. Hart has 40 acres of vines, which is about 16 hectares. I hear she needs help." Eleanor cut in at once. "I can manage, Clara. A woman alone can manage all that? Do not be so stubborn." The air went heavy. Eleanor flushed, angry and ashamed. When she left the store and Luke stepped outside, a low voice rose behind him. "Mrs. Hart," Jasper Holt called, smiling like a man who enjoyed stepping on others. "Still getting by all on your own? I could help, or I could buy that vineyard off you for a fair price. I am not selling, and I do not need help." "Oh, is that so? Hiring drifters now? That is a sign of desperation." Luke's hand tightened on the reins. "This is my land," Eleanor said, each word clean as a cut, "and I will decide what happens to it." Jasper let out a small laugh. "There are things that are not for you, Carver." It was not only a warning. It was the first line drawn in the dust. A week later, on a dusty road, Luke found Eleanor Hart struggling with a wagon whose wheel had split. 20 crates of grapes had spilled into the heat. "Let me help," he said. "I do not need it," she answered, voice rough. "The wheel is gone. I will just patch it for now." She looked up and saw the pale scar at his shoulder. "You have worked a vineyard before?" "Sonoma, 2 seasons." She thought for a beat. 2 weeks. Board and $1 a day. Work hard, talk little. "Yes, ma'am." Hem. They lashed the wheel with rope. Sweat, dust, and silence. When they finished, she said quietly, "Do the work and be on your way. I will not feed the gossip." "All right." But that night, lying in the bunkhouse, he could not forget how her hand trembled when she took the hammer. And he knew all right was a lie they were both telling. On Sunday morning, St. Rose was packed. Luke sat in the back row. Eleanor Hart sat in the third, her back straight like she was bracing against the whole world. After Mass, Jasper Holt's voice carried. "Mrs. Hart, I hear you hired a drifter. The whole town is talking." Eleanor turned. "Mr. Carver works for me. It is none of your business." Jasper sneered. "A widow and a boy young enough to be her son?" Before he could finish, Luke stepped forward. "If you have something to say it to me. Do not hide behind a woman." "You do not understand the morals of this place," Jasper snapped. "If morality is humiliating other people, I do not need it," Luke said. Silence spread. Father O'Brien came forward, gentle but firm. "Have you forgotten this is the house of God?" But the circle of mean eyes held. Clara Tate touched Eleanor's shoulder. Miguel stood back, hat in his hands. "I am going home, mister." "Carver, ride with Miguel," Eleanor said, steady as steel. She walked away, leaving Jasper Holt with a thin smile that looked too pleased with itself. That night, the wind rose. Miguel's knock jolted Luke upright. "La tormenta, the storm." They ran out. Rain whipped like lashes. Thunder tore the sky. The wind wrecked the vines, toppled trellises, ripped canes. Eleanor was already there, soaked through, fighting in the mud. Her hair clung to her face, her dress pasted to her skin, her hands tying the main trellis as fast as she could. Luke plunged in beside her, gripping the free end of the rope, and together they leaned into the gale. When she slipped, he caught her. Their breaths mingled, rain like ice down to the bone. "I cannot lose this place," she shouted into the wind. "You will not," Luke said, squeezing her hand. "We will hold it." They saved most of the vineyard. When the storm died, they were both soaked and shivering. Miguel went to check on his family, leaving them in the warm dark of the stable. Eleanor lit the lamp. Gold light washed over her skin, her dress clinging close. Luke started to turn away, but she said softly, "Do not go." The air went still. "People will talk," she whispered. "Let them," Luke answered, stepping closer. "You are young, and I know exactly what I am doing," he said. "You do not know anything about me." "Vi." "Yes, I do. I know you are stronger than any man I have met, and lonelier than I am." Her breath hitched. "You are a fool." "Maybe," he said, "but I see something worth losing my mind over." And Eleanor Hart stepped forward, with rain still whispering on the roof, and kissed him. That kiss was not gentle. It was 7 years of solitude breaking open. Eleanor Hart gripped his shirt, breath quick, and Luke Carver held her like 1 inch of letting go would cost him something he would never find again. She tasted like rain and earth and a hunger locked up too long. When they parted, they shook, and not from the cold. "If we do this," Eleanor whispered, "everything will change. Holt will use it. The town will too." "Then let them," Luke said, his hand still holding her cheek. "I will not leave unless you tell me to." She searched his face a long time, then nodded and led him up to the hayloft, where straw was piled high and rain drummed the roof like a heartbeat. In the soft gold light, their shadows folded together. She trembled when his hands found her skin, afraid and aching to touch another soul after so many quiet years. He kissed her throat while rain and wood smoke tangled in the air. Neither of them said another word. That night, they learned how to trust again, with skin, with breath, with heartbeat. Every movement was slow and deliberate, like each second was sacred. When dawn threaded through the boards, Eleanor lay quiet in his arms. Her hair had dried and spilled across her shoulders, her face stripped of its usual steel. Luke looked at her, the woman who had chosen to live hard as stone, and now lay soft in peace, and he understood. He had fallen in love. She opened her eyes, fear flaring back for a beat. "Luke, about last night." "Do not," he cut in. "I do not regret it." She sat up, pulling her dress around her. "If they find out, I could lose the land. Jasper only needs an excuse. California law will side with him." "Then we get ahead of them," Luke said, taking her hand. "Marry me." Eleanor froze. "What?" "Not because of last night. Because I want something real. I want to build something with you." He held her gaze. "I am tired of drifting, and you are tired of being alone. I love you, Eleanor Hart, from the moment you poured water into the dust to prove you did not need anyone." Tears slid down her cheeks. "They will say I am desperate, and you are a fortune hunter." "Let them talk," he whispered. "I will call you the bravest person I have ever known." She kissed him this time soft, lingering, and salt with tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes." Late in October, Paso Robles glowed with lanterns for the Harvest Festival. A banjo twanged in the square, and the air smelled of cider and dust. Luke Carver stood at the edge of the crowd in clothes Father O'Brien had lent him: white shirt, dark waistcoat, boots polished bright. In his pocket was a marriage license signed 3 days earlier, legal, binding, and true. Then Eleanor Hart walked toward him, and everything around him seemed to slow. She wore a navy cotton dress, plain and elegant, her blonde hair loose, moonlight slipping over each strand. Luke had never seen her like this, soft, womanly, and powerful in a way that stole the breath. They moved through the crowd together. The whispers rose like a hive, but Eleanor kept walking, her hand faintly shaking in his. Clara Tate smiled from her stall. Miguel and his family nodded. Only Jasper Holt waited, a cup of whiskey in hand and a crooked smile. "Mrs. Hart," he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "Showing off your latest prize? Is this young buck the reward for the grape harvest?" Eleanor's fingers tightened around Luke's, but before she could answer, Luke's fist met Jasper's jaw. The crack rang out. Jasper dropped hard and silent. The crowd went still. Luke breathed deep and said evenly, "That is my wife, you just insulted." People stared. Father O'Brien stepped forward, stern. "Son, that is not the way." He stopped when he saw Eleanor's eyes, not ashamed, only resolute. Luke turned to Jasper, each word clear. "I am sorry I hit you, but I will not apologize for loving her." Father O'Brien looked around and raised his voice. "Eleanor Hart is hard-working and honest, and has endured more than most men here. Luke Carver is a veteran who fought for this country. They chose each other. So tell me, who are we to judge?" The thick silence split when Clara spoke up. "I stand with them." Miguel raised his hand. "Me too." Others followed, women who had known whispers, people who understood loneliness. Jasper spat blood and growled, "You think marrying her fixes this? I will show the whole town what you two really are." Eleanor lifted her chin. "Then let them see. I would rather be scorned and happy than respected and dying inside." She pulled Luke toward the center of the square. The band struck up again, the banjo bright. They danced in the middle of the murmurs, as if nothing existed but the two of them, and this harvest belonged to them. 2 weeks later, the Paso Robles Town Council convened. Jasper Holt had filed a formal complaint, accusing Eleanor Hart of violating moral standards, quote, citing a California statute that could force the land of someone deemed morally unfit to be seized or sold. In the cramped chamber, 5 men sat behind a long table, light cutting through heavy curtains and catching dust in the air. Eleanor sat straight, hands gripping her skirt. Luke Carver sat beside her, his hand holding hers. Jasper stood, voice thick with borrowed virtue. "She has disgraced this town, A woman who let a drifter stay on her land before marriage, should we tolerate that? He waited for the murmurs, but Father O'Brien was already on his feet. I will testify, he said, voice low and steady. Mrs. Hart pays her taxes on time, hires local hands, and works with honesty. If we are speaking of morals, perhaps we should mention Mr. Holt's repeated attempts to force her to sell for half what the land is worth, and his harassment in the marketplace. The room went quiet. Jasper's face flushed hot. He started to bark back, but Clara Tate cut in, words sharp as a blade. Eleanor Hart is the strongest, most decent woman I know. She has the right to love who she loves. Miguel stood, hat crushed in his hands, his English careful but sure. Mr. Carver does not drink to fight. He works hard. I say they are not wrong. End. At last, Eleanor rose. She set a marriage certificate on the table. We are married, legal, under California law. Maybe what came before was wrong, but now we live right. I will not ask permission to be happy. The council withdrew. Whispers. A gavel. When they returned, the vote was 3-2. Eleanor Hart kept her land. Jasper lurched up, red with rage, and pushed out the door without a word. Eleanor sat, breath shaking. Luke leaned in and whispered, We won. No, she said, a small smile touching her mouth. We survived. And she was right, they paid for it. 2 major buyers cancelled their contracts, and the whispers did not stop. At church, people avoided their eyes. But Clara placed a larger order. Miguel brought his kin to help, and a merchant from San Francisco offered to buy their grapes. They lost plenty, but they kept what mattered, the land and each other. Winter came. Luke worked the vines by day and the forge by night. Eleanor said little, but the look in her eyes when he came home late held more gratitude than words. In November, she told him she was carrying a child. Luke looked at her, those eyes once cold as steel now lit like sunrise. He set his hand on her belly and said softly, We are going to rebuild all of it. Are you sure? I am sure. And if we get only one chance, we will make it count. Spring returned, and the vineyard woke. Miguel brought family to help prune. Clara found new buyers in Sacramento. Bit by bit they rebuilt, not for forgiveness, but to prove that love, even judged, can root deep in the soil of California. 23 years passed from the day Eleanor Hart poured a bucket into California dust. Luke Carver's hair had silver in it now. His hands were thick with callus. He still rose with the dawn to tend vines beside the woman who had built a life with him. They had 3 children, 200 acres, which is about 81 hectares, and a place called the Hart Carver Vineyard once doubted by the whole town, now feeding it. People sometimes asked Luke, when he sat down at noon, whether he ever regretted it marrying a woman 12 years older, fighting all of Paso Robles just to keep that love. He would only smile, the slow smile of a man who had lost much and still found life worth living. I had 23 good years, 3 children, green land under my feet, and a woman who looks at me every morning like I am worth something. Hell, then he would look out across the vineyard, where new leaves shivered in the breeze and ran all the way to the far hills. People ask if I regret it, he would say. But what is worth keeping more than happiness? After they were gone, the Hart Carver Vineyard endured, becoming part of the famous Paso Robles wine country. And every spring, when the yellow roses bloomed along the lane, the kind Eleanor planted to draw the bees, you could swear the wind still whispered through the rose, like a promise that never left, that love, if it grows deep enough, leaves a mark, like vine roots gripping the earth, and yellow roses opening to the California Sunday, people. It brought a dry piece of land back to life with steadiness, kindness, and faith. If you believe brave love still exists, please like, follow, and share so we can keep stories like this alive.